If you don't watch this video, you might keep repeating the same mistake. Not because you're unaware, but because you were taught to ignore the very signal that could have protected you. Most people don't fall into toxic dynamics because they're naive. They fall in because they override their own instinct. And that override almost always happens at the beginning. Let me start with something simple. Before manipulation starts, before attachment forms, before confusion appears, your body already knows something is off. Not in words, not in logic, but in sensation, a pause, a tightening, a subtle discomfort you can't explain. That's not anxiety, that's information. Here's the problem. That first signal is quiet, and certain people work very hard to make sure you don't listen to it. We're taught to distrust our gut. We're told, don't judge too fast. Give people a chance. Maybe you're overthinking. And most of the time, that advice is harmless. But in some dynamics, it becomes dangerous. Let's define what we're talking about clearly. Your gut instinct is not fear. It's not paranoia. It's not imagination. It's your nervous system detecting inconsistency before your conscious mind can label it. Your brain needs evidence. Your body reads patterns, and it reads them fast. Here's the first red flag. You feel slightly off around someone even though they're saying the right things. Nothing is clearly wrong, but nothing fully settles either. That discomfort doesn't scream. It whispers. And that's exactly why it gets ignored. Now pay close attention to what happens next, because this is where people lose themselves. Instead of asking, why do I feel this way? Most people ask, what's wrong with me? That single question flips the entire dynamic. This is where certain personalities step in, not by attacking your instinct directly, but by reframing it. They don't say you're wrong. They say you're sensitive. You think too much. You're guarded because of your past. And suddenly, your intuition becomes a flaw. This is the moment everything shifts. And this is where I want you to pause and think. Have you ever felt uneasy around someone, but talked yourself out of it because you didn't want to seem unfair? If yes, note that. That's not weakness. That's conditioning. This next part matters more than anything else in this video, because this is where most people disconnect, not from the video, but from themselves. Here's the truth. The first red flag is not something they do. It's something you feel and then suppress. That suppression is the opening. Certain people are extremely skilled at sensing empathy. They notice how quickly you explain yourself, how often you give the benefit of the doubt, how uncomfortable you are with conflict, and they adapt, not consciously, but strategically. They don't rush you. They soften you. They mirror values. They validate your patience. They praise your understanding. And slowly, your gut instinct gets drowned out by reassurance. Here's a key insight most people miss. The moment you start explaining away your discomfort, the dynamic has already changed, because now, instead of observing them, you're managing yourself. Let me ask you something important. When you first noticed that feeling, did it disappear or did it just get quieter? That answer matters, because real intuition doesn't vanish. It waits. Here's why this works so well. Your nervous system flags inconsistency, but your mind wants coherence. So when someone offers an explanation that sounds reasonable, your brain accepts it, even if your body doesn't. This creates a split. Your logic says it's fine. Your body says something's off. And when those two disagree, most people side with logic. That's the trap. Now notice what happens next. Each time you ignore that signal, it becomes easier to ignore the next one. Not because it's weaker, but because you're training yourself not to listen. This is how early self-betrayal forms, quietly, incrementally. Here's another question, and be honest with yourself. Have you ever thought, I noticed it early, but I didn't trust myself? If that thought feels familiar, you're exactly who this video is for. Let's clear something up. The goal is not to distrust people. The goal is to stop distrusting yourself, Certain personalities don't fear confrontation, they fear detection. That's why the earliest red flag is the one they work hardest to erase, not later, at the beginning. They don't suppress your instinct by force. They suppress it by normalizing your discomfort, intellectualizing your reactions, reframing your boundaries as emotional issues. And the more self-aware you are, the more effective this becomes. Here's a crucial distinction. Healthy people respond to intuition with curiosity. Unhealthy ones respond with correction. They correct your perception before you even fully express it. Watch for this. If your first internal reaction is always followed by self-doubt, that's not coincidence. That's conditioning. Let's talk about why this feels so confusing, because you're not ignoring obvious danger, you're ignoring subtle misalignment, and subtle things are easy to rationalize. But here's the reality. Every toxic dynamic looks normal until you zoom out. The first red flag is rarely dramatic. It's quiet, and that's why it's powerful. I want you to consider this. What would change in your life if you treated discomfort as data, not something to fix? That question alone reframes everything. Your gut instinct is not asking you to run. It's asking you to pause, to observe, to not rush intimacy, trust, or emotional access. And when someone pressures you past that pause, emotionally, socially, or morally, that pressure is the red flag. Here's the most important takeaway. People who are safe don't need you to silence your intuition. They don't benefit from your confusion. They don't rush your comfort. So if someone subtly benefits from you doubting yourself, pay attention. Let me leave you with this. Your gut instinct doesn't shout because it doesn't need to. It only needs you to listen once. And once you do, you start noticing patterns you can't unsee. What was the first moment you ignored that later made sense? If you're willing, share that in the comments, not for others, for yourself.